Welcome to Alexandria, Virginia. My name is Tim with Alexandria History Tours. And right behind me is a former home of a man named Nicholas P. Trist. Interesting about Nicholas Trist, he was actually married to a woman named Virginia Randolph Trist. Who was Virginia Randolph? Well, she was actually the granddaughter of Thomas Jefferson. That's right, the granddaughter of Thomas Jefferson lived here in Alexandria, specifically at a rented house, the one behind me, in the 1870s. Now, a little bit more about her husband, Nicholas Trist. Nicholas Trist initially went to West Point, but he never graduated. He would later become a lawyer. In fact, he studied law under his grandfather-in-law, Thomas Jefferson. That's right, he was an apprentice under Jefferson. He also learned a lot about diplomatic skills under Thomas Jefferson, which came in handy because Trist ultimately became a diplomat. In fact, he was consul to Havana for many years in the 1830s and into the 1840s. Now, ultimately, Trist would pick up on a lot of Spanish-speaking skills, which was very important because Trist is the man that negotiated the end of the Mexican-American War officially in 1848. Now, a little bit of context about the start of the Mexican-American War. Ultimately, Texas won its independence from Mexico in 1836. Of course, Mexico never recognized Texas as an independent country. It wasn't until 9 years later, 1845, that the United States would annex Texas. And ultimately, there was disputed border regions around the Rio Grande, the Nueces River, that would trigger the first shots of the Mexican-American War. Now, ultimately, the war would swing widely in the United States' favor. At the end of 1847, very brilliant, gifted General Winfield Scott, one of the most talented officers in United States military history, would ultimately lead the campaign that would eventually take Mexico City by September of 1847. Now, the President of the United States at the time, President James K. Polk, he is overseeing a war that is very politically unpopular. So the politics of division are very much rampant in the United States. Keep in mind, Polk is a Democrat, and ultimately the Whigs are very much against the war. Polk does send an envoy down to Mexico in 1847, specifically in April of that year. It is Nicholas P. Trist. And Trist's mission is to actually negotiate the peace between the United States and Mexico. Well, by later in that year, specifically by December, Trist has lost trust and confidence in President Polk. President Polk now decides to recall Nicholas P. Trist. Well, Trist does get the message that President Polk has recalled him. He's been informed, you're fired. However, what does Trist decide to do? Ignore the message. In fact, Trist decides to stay in Mexico, specifically in a town known as Guadalupe Hidalgo, and continue to actually negotiate with his Mexican counterparts. The negotiations kick off in January of 1848. Trist is there by himself for the next month. He's his own interpreter. He's his own archivist. He's negotiating. He's also doing a lot of his own writing, secretarial work at this time. And by the end of that month, he does send to President Polk, by way of Secretary of State James Buchanan, a 6,000-word treaty. This puts the Polk administration in a bit of a bind. What are they going to do? He's been fired, but he's delivered them a treaty, and he's actually negotiated swaths of territory that includes present-day California, New Mexico, Arizona, parts of Utah, parts of Wyoming, and Colorado. It achieves most of what Polk wanted him to achieve when he actually sent him down in April of 1847. Well, ultimately, the decision that the Polk administration makes is to send the treaty to the Senate for ratification, and it was ratified in 1848. That is why we describe Nicholas Trist as a renegade diplomat. He had been fired but continued to do his duty, thought that he saw a window of opportunity to negotiate with the Mexican government at that time. See, just as disruptive as the U.S. politics were in terms of the internal division, Mexican politics at that time were in total shambles. The government was hanging on by the skin of its teeth, and Trist knew that there was a window of opportunity to make a deal happen. Okay, so now I'm standing here in Ivy Hill Cemetery in Alexandria, Virginia. And behind me are the graves of Nicholas P. Trist and his wife, Virginia Randolph Trist, who again, I do want to reiterate, the granddaughter of Thomas Jefferson. Interestingly enough, as I mentioned, Trist negotiated the treaty, and the price that the United States paid for the territory that was acquired was $15 million. At the time, it was the second largest land acquisition in United States history, a second largest after the Louisiana Purchase, which, if you recall, was made by President Thomas Jefferson, who mentored Nicholas Trist. And I always get a kick out of the price that the United States paid for Louisiana territory was also $15 million. Coincidence? Well, I'll let you decide that one. Now, ultimately, when Trist returned to the United States, boy, did he have a rough go. You see, he was persona non grata. The Polk administration was so frustrated with him. He was fired. He wasn't paid for the time from which he was recalled up through the time that he did the negotiations. In fact, he wouldn't be paid until 1871 by Congress. He would get back pay with interest. Now, at the time, he was living here in Alexandria, and ultimately he would pass away February 11th of 1874. He is buried right behind me. His wife, Virginia, followed him 7 years later. She died in 1881, also buried right here in Alexandria. Well, this is a really good story, and it's not very well known. A lot of people don't realize the story of Nicholas Trist. In fact, if you talk to most Alexandrians, they probably never even heard of Nicholas Trist. That's why we like doing these videos. That's why we like doing the tours. If you like this video, definitely subscribe, like it, comment on it, whatever you want to do. And then check us out. Go to alexandriahistorytours.com. You can actually come here to Old Town Alexandria and take a tour with us and learn a lot of these great stories, some of which aren't very widely known, but boy, are they fascinating. We love doing what we do, and we hope to see you soon. Stay tuned. We'll put out a lot more great videos. For now, have a great day, and thank you for tuning in.